Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a video that is sort of a reaction to something that happened over on Middle of the Book March's channel. I will put a link to her video on this topic down below. Basically, she did a video talking about hate reading and mentioned a couple of books that she has hate read, and I thought I would just kind of pick up the conversation over here and talk about some books that I have hate read, because if you'd like to know if I have ever hate read a book, hoo boy, I have hate read a lot. If you're unfamiliar, this is basically the same principle as when you hate watch something. It's when you are not enjoying something, but something about the experience of not liking it propels you through it so you feel like you need to finish. I am only really going to talk about books where I did read the entire thing, but I have a couple of honorable mentions. The first one being A Little Life by Hanya, Yanigahara. I really hated this book. I got a little more than halfway through, and I was at a point where I was ready to despair about what was going to happen in the book. It was really making me angry. So I skipped to the ending, and I thought the ending was extremely emotionally manipulative, so I put it down and didn't finish. There are a lot of books where I stop in the middle because I really wasn't liking it, but in this case, I did skip to the end. And that one in particular stands out to me for an honorable mention because I did skip to the ending. So I did kind of get the full experience of the book. I just didn't read the whole thing, which is why it's an honorable mention. I am also going to give an honorable mention to Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, which is the only book I'm going to be holding up during the course of this video, because if you follow along, you know I really tried to finish this book earlier this year and I couldn't do it. So it doesn't qualify. I didn't get to the end. I was kind of hate reading it for a while, and then it just got to be too much and I had to stop. But I tried, and here it is, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Let's get into the actual list of books that I have hate read, and we will start with A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne. That is one of the more recent ones. This was a buddy read with Sean the Book Maniac, and being honest, I probably wouldn't have finished it at all if it hadn't been a buddy read, because he and I basically made fun of the book in our check-ins, and that got me through to the end. I just really didn't like the book. I didn't like the character. I thought it was a little bit predictable at a certain point, and there were just things in it that were kind of infuriating, one of which was noticed by Sean, not by me. There is a character in the book who has a signed first edition of Marais by E.M. Forster. However, Marais was published after E.M. Forster died. That was part of the whole point. So there cannot be signed first editions of that book, which seems like a nitpicky little detail. However, A Ladder to the Sky is full of things like that. And that is one of the reasons that we were kind of making fun of it as we went through, and why it was a hate read for me. The next one is The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming. A couple of years ago, before I had a BookTube channel, I got it in my head that I would read all of the Ian Fleming James Bond books. I had gone through and watched all of the movies because we got a box set of that Bond 50 set that came out in 2012 or 2013. We got it for like 50% off. It was really cheap. So just for fun, we watched all the movies. And then when that was done, I figured I would read all of the books. And they are not very well written. They are racist. They are very terrible toward women. But the one that finally broke me was The Spy Who Loved Me, because it is told from the perspective of the female character who Bond gets involved with. She is working in a hotel. It is very different from the movie plot. So she is working in a hotel. These kind of goons come and start to menace her, and then James Bond shows up and ends up saving her. But the book insinuates that she wants to be sexually assaulted, and that she would like this. It actually pretty flatly says that women like to be sexually assaulted. And at that point, I don't think I threw the book across the room at that point in anger, because I was reading it in bed and my husband was asleep. But I did throw it across the room at some point on my channel. And yeah, it's terrible. It's pretty despicable. And I believe in the book after that, which was On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it only gets worse, because Ian Fleming explained the backstory of Tracy DiVincenzo, and her mother just hung out in areas where there was a criminal element because she wanted to be sexually assaulted. And when Tracy's father did sexually assault her, she followed him around like a dog, hoping it would happen again. And then eventually, I think he married her. So, yeah, it's not great. The whole series is not great, but The Spy Who Loved Me is really where it went off the rails, and boy, did I read that book. Actually, I should include On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because at that point, I was nearly done with the series, and any Bond book that was published after The Spy Who Loved Me that was written by Ian Fleming would have qualified as a hate read, because I hated the series at that point, but I kind of stuck with it just because the anger was propelling me forward, and I wanted to. It was a completion thing. I was so close to the end. I figured it's like, if I just do this, I can be done and never have to think about it ever, ever, ever again. The next one is Adam by Ariel Schrag. This is one of my most hated books of all time, and I did finish it. I'm amazed because it really infuriated me. It's not a YA book, but it flirts with being a YA book. It's about a teenager who goes to visit his sister in New York. His sister is a lesbian, and one of her lesbian friends he just has a total crush on her, and she mistakes him for someone who is transgender, like a female transitioning to male. And he goes along with it. And it's terrible. I know the idea of deception is fairly common in romantic plot lines or romantic comedies, but in this instance, it is so insulting and it's handled so offensively, and it's just not good. Also, Ariel Schrag sets the book circa somewhere around 2003 for no apparent reason other than that she wants the characters to constantly watch and talk about the L Word, the TV show. Ariel Schrag wrote for the L Word. So, it's terrible. And I can't talk about the ending because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who might potentially want to read it. I don't know if I'm encouraging anyone to by talking about it like this, but the ending is truly atrocious. And I saw an interview with Ariel Schrag where she tried to walk back what happens in the end. She basically, actually is her own book, except there's no evidence for what she claimed anywhere in the book. So I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And it just made me more and more angry the more I worked my way through it. The next one is Dexter is Dead by Jeff Lindsay. This was the final Dexter book by Jeff Lindsay. I was not as much of a fan of the books as I was of the TV show, although the TV show had diminishing returns by the end as well. But you could tell at a certain point that Jeff Lindsay was really just going through the motions with the Dexter books. The first one is interesting. The second one was okay. They just started going downhill really quickly, and you could tell he had lost interest. And in the second to last book, it almost seemed like Jeff Lindsay was making a big change that might rejuvenate his interest in the series. And then it was announced that he was only doing one more, and this would be the final book in the series. So it was kind of confusing to me already. Like, why would you change things so drastically and then end the series? He'd fallen into this rut where every single book ended with Dexter's kids getting kidnapped and placed into danger. It was horrible. So the premise of the book was that Dexter is in jail because he has been blamed for a murder that happened at the end of the second to last book, which he didn't actually commit. So the tension that you think you're going to get is that he might actually have to face punishment for his crimes, but ironically, for a crime he did not actually commit. However, Jeff Lindsay throws that plot line out almost immediately and just goes back to his standard plot line where it ends with the kids get kidnapped. The whole thing just happens all over again. And, if I were ever to tell Jeff Lindsay something, I would tell him, if you don't feel invested in a series, just don't write it anymore. Don't keep making it worse. It was terrible. And it was kind of, in my opinion, offensive to anyone who followed the series, myself included. Next one might be a bit of a surprise. I don't hear too many people talking about this book anymore. It's The Post-Birthday World by Lionel Shriver. I was really intrigued by the premise of this book, when I first heard about it, because basically the main character, I think her name is Arena, starts out in a relationship with one guy who's this kind of boring, I don't remember his name, but he's this boring sort of banker type character. And they have been in a long-term relationship, but they're definitely in a rut. Things aren't exciting. And she's not necessarily happy anymore. This snooker player comes into her life and she ends up alone with him at a birthday dinner. And they have a sort of romantic tension during the dinner. And the book turns into sort of a sliding doors scenario. It goes into two different directions. In one plot line, Arena kisses the snooker player and has a bit of an affair. The affair is found out, and then she gets into a relationship with the snooker player. And in the other one, she stays in a relationship with her safe, boring banker guy. And then what the book promises is that her life will go in sort of two completely different directions. But instead of a diverging path, it stays parallel in the weirdest way. And that makes it really predictable, because if something happens in one storyline, you can count on the opposite happening in the next storyline. For instance, in one storyline, she wins an award. In another storyline, she loses the award. In one storyline, she diffuses an argument. In the next storyline, she's the one causing the scene. And no spoilers, I don't want to go into the end, but there's an ultimate opposite in these two different storylines that happens toward the end. And that was bad enough, but it felt like Lionel Shriver had contempt for Arena for some reason, because at the end of the day, both of these guys are terrible. And yet it's presented as if they are Arena's only option. And for some reason, it feels like the book is trying to punish her when she didn't really do anything wrong. And she's just blamed for everything. She's constantly supposed to feel guilty for things that she didn't necessarily do. Lionel Shriver also pokes politics into this book. It was published somewhere around 2005, maybe, somewhere in that zip code. And she spends a couple of pages taking pot shots at Hillary Clinton, which is kind of like, what? Where is this coming from? And then the characters are all in New York for 9/11 for no apparent reason. It's just, the more the book proceeds, to me, the more offensive it got. But also that just kept my jaw dropping lower and lower. So I had to keep going. And it was terrible. It was not worth it. So that's The Post-Birthday World by Lionel Shriver. The next one is actually Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. It is the only one of Stephanie Meyer's books I have ever read. And I read it because I was working at a Borders. It was my day off. My sister had read the Twilight books and was obsessed with them. And she left her copy of Twilight out on the kitchen table. I got up in the morning and was having breakfast and just kind of picked it up out of curiosity and just kind of blinked. And I had finished the book over the course of the day because I hated it that much. It propelled me through and I finished it in a single day. I did not like it. And I know there are a lot of people out there who like Twilight, but there's so much in it that is kind of gross and problematic for me. Especially, it plays into one of my least favorite tropes in romances, where it takes the idea of Pride and Prejudice and then completely gets it wrong. Because, of course, in Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy doesn't seem to like Elizabeth Bennet at all. He seems kind of mean and snobbish to her. That is the point of the book, in fact. But a lot of romances take that idea and have the guy just be a jerk. And you're supposed to believe that this is true love. And that is something that happens in the Twilight book. And there's like a vampire baseball game. It is so weird. And just, the ending is so abrupt. It almost feels like, oh, there should be some kind of tension in here. I'm just going to hammer in a random kidnap plot and Edward will have to come save the day. It's a terrible book. It's terribly written. Vampire baseball game. Need I say more? The next one is Acceptance by Jeff VanderMeer. I was really excited about Annihilation. I read it, and Annihilation was good. I was nervous at the end of it, though, because I really liked the first season of the TV show Lost, and Lost is now my classic example of this type of thing. I really liked the first season of Lost. The second season started to get infuriating because instead of answering questions, it just kept throwing more questions at you and trying to get more and more mysterious. And then it stops being fun. And that is exactly the progression of the Inheritance trilogy for me. Annihilation was good. The middle book was Authority, and I didn't like that book. Things started getting too complicated, and you weren't getting any answers. And Acceptance was just a mess. I really did not like it. And I kind of had a feeling that that was the direction it was going to go, but I was hoping to be surprised, and I just really did not like it. And I got to the end, but I did not like it at all. And I realized there are a lot of people who are very into that trilogy. Not me. I'm sorry. The next one is Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. So I read the Da Vinci Code when it was first published because I was really curious. My memory of that is that Borders was putting a huge push on the Da Vinci Code when it was published, and we booksellers couldn't quite figure out why, because it seemed like a random... We got so many copies of this book by an author nobody had heard of. Nobody had really heard of the book, and we kept trying to... There was like a hand selling contest attached to it, and we couldn't get people interested in the book at all. So I believe within like 3 or 4 months of the book being released, we were about ready to start returning copies because we were just overwhelmed with copies that weren't selling. And then all of a sudden, it started to sell. So in that window, before it actually started to sell and become the phenomenon that was the Da Vinci Code, I read it and really did not like it. And my other bookseller friends and I would just make fun of it because it was like the company wanted us to sell this book. Nobody's going to buy this book. And then people bought the book, which was kind of funny and weird. But, you know, if you've read the Da Vinci Code, you know it's a mess. At least with the Da Vinci Code, I told myself that people were learning art history, but that kind of went out the window with Angels and Demons when I read that. Because, of course, once the Da Vinci Code got popular, people started rediscovering Angels and Demons, which had been published previously. I had no intention of reading any other Dan Brown books, but my older sister, who usually has good taste in books, told me, oh, no. Angels and Demons is much better. So I thought, well, okay. And I picked up Angels and Demons, and it was terrible. It was, in fact, worse. And somewhere in the course of that book, Dan Brown was describing a sculpture by Raphael and explained that Raphael had secretly put pagan symbols in the sculpture as a sort of screw you to the Pope who had commissioned the sculpture in the first place. And it was supposed to show Illuminati. Was it the Illuminati that was the bad guy in that one, or was that the Da Vinci Code? I don't even remember. But whatever organization was the bad guy, that it was supposed to show that he was subverting the Pope's intent. So I was thinking to myself, I'm not familiar with this sculpture. I'm going to Google it, because this was in the early days of Google. I looked it up and found out that the Pope had specifically commissioned those pagan symbols to be in the sculpture because he wanted to show that Christianity was being spread to the pagans and was winning. So I looked up a couple of other things and found out that Dan Brown's art history is wildly wrong. The book itself is just terrible. It is the first book I threw across the room in frustration because of something that happens at the end, and I don't know spoilers again, but it involves a piece of tarp, a helicopter, a big fall, and was it an antimatter bomb or matter antimatter bomb? I can't remember which, but if you've read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's ludicrous. And I did pick it up and finish it, but it is one of the worst books I have ever read, and always will be. Oh, by the way, I have to go back and say that after I hated Angels and Demons so badly, I told my sister that I had just really not liked it at all. And she confessed that she had read it while she was on painkillers after having her wisdom teeth taken out. So that explained that. The next book is probably a bit of a surprise. It's Mildred Pierce by James M. Cain. I don't think I'm alone in saying that I feel like I was misled about this book. So if you're familiar with the film adaptation starring Joan Crawford, it is framed as sort of a film noir with like a murder mystery element, and that is not the book. It turns out they twisted parts of the book to really beef up this sort of film noir aspect and have there be like a murder and a murder mystery, and the book does not have that. But what really infuriated me about the book is that it just seems like for long parts of the book, nothing is happening. In the middle of the book, or somewhere toward the middle of the book, Mildred Pierce is opening her own restaurant. And James M. Cain just goes on for pages and pages and pages about how she was going to prepare the chicken and how she was being really smart because by doing the chicken that way, she could also prepare it a second way, but she's only buying one set of chicken, but she could prepare it 2 different ways. And really in depth about how she was going to lay out the tables in the restaurant. Now, I'm a foodie. I love restaurants. I love the idea of setting up restaurants, but this was boring. It was just not necessary, didn't need to be there, completely stalled the plot. And I was so angry I wanted to stop, but I kept going because it was making me angry and I wanted to see how bad it was. So I'm not a fan of Mildred Pierce. I did see the movie. The movie is actually better because it actually has life to it. But the book, to me, was just a big old nothing. I feel like I'm being mean in this video, but we're talking about hate reading, so I feel like that's also the point. The next one is the first that I have a video in which I talk about it. It's Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. I did a full rant review on this, which I will link in the description box down below. This felt like Malcolm Gladwell was deliberately taking on controversial topics and, actuallying the wrong side of the argument. Like, this was published just before Know My Name by Chanel Miller came out. Chanel Miller hadn't even come out as the victim of Brock Turner at that point, which is, and it is bad timing on Malcolm Gladwell's part because since she was anonymous, he probably wouldn't have had a chance to interview Chanel Miller or talk to her. However, he does a chapter about that incident in which he shames her for drinking and basically says, well, yes, people who drink shouldn't be sexually assaulted. However, binge drinking leads to sexual assaults. And it's cringy because, I mean, of course, if you binge drink, you are vulnerable to bad things. But he just picks the wrong side and gets self-righteous about it, which is even more infuriating. And he does it about case after case after case. He does the Penn State. He talks about that. It is wild how hard he goes in for the wrong side of an argument in this book, and it really soured me on Malcolm Gladwell completely. I had always thought that he had interesting arguments and interesting cases. I tended to think that he would get distracted by tangents in at least a couple of his books that didn't necessarily support his thesis statement, and sometimes I don't think he actually proved his thesis statement, but his stories were interesting. And Talking to Strangers is where I just broke up with him. I had been a big fan of his podcast before that as well, and now I unsubscribed to it. I will never listen to another episode again. I will never read another Malcolm Gladwell book. It was that bad. But I did finish it, and I have a rant review that you can watch in the description box down below. The next one is also going to make some people mad. It's The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I had read a bunch of John Green books in a row, which was probably a mistake. Sometimes when you binge an author, you pick up on all of their habits. Sometimes there are good motifs that go through all of their books, but sometimes they have sort of a negative thing that you start to pick up on because you're reading so much. So it was one John Green too many. Now, a lot of people called The Fault in Their Stars their favorite book of that year. It was on a lot of best of lists, and I felt like a lone dissenter at certain points because I really didn't like it. I thought it was manipulative. I thought it was cloying. I don't know that there's any way where you can write a book about dying teenagers without feeling manipulative, but I feel like John Green very much wanted to have it both ways. He wanted to kind of joke about being manipulative and toying with your emotions, and he wanted the emotional payoff from manipulating and just kind of cloying at your heart. The other thing was that, and I had teenagers pushing back on me about this one. I'd say teenagers do not talk like this. No human being talks like this. And teenagers commented on the review I wrote at the time to say, oh no, me and my friends definitely talk like that. No teenager talks like that. I'm sorry. There's a conversation where I forget her name, but the female protagonist is sitting down to breakfast with her family, and somebody mentions, oh, we should have breakfast for dinner, and she goes on a rant about how, oh, breakfast for dinner, why should eggs be exclusive to breakfast, why should eggs have breakfast exclusivity, because everybody talks way too fancy in this book. And it's supposed to be about labels that people, it's like, the conversation goes on long enough that you just want to like shake John Green and be like, I get the point. It's a metaphor. Oh my God. And things like that. He is really heavy-handed with these things, even the male protagonist. constantly puts unlit cigarettes in his mouth because you put the killing thing in your mouth, but you don't give it the power to kill you or something like that. And this just repeats throughout the book. And they involve Anne Frank, and it's just a whole lot of emotionally manipulative stuff about dead teenagers. And I did not like it. I respect that there are a lot of people out there who do. I had to admit at that point that I was kind of done with John Green because his books were fun, but they got a little too cute and quirky for me. So I had to kind of bow out after that. The next one is The Chestnut Man by Søren Sveistrup, and I do have a review of this one from my channel because I read it, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. I hated it. But I had just had foot surgery, so I was laid up on this very couch, in fact, an entire weekend, and tore through it. It's a really long book. It's so offensive in so many ways, and it's predictable, and there's a twist that doesn't make sense because it feels like mysteries are supposed to have twists, right? It has to be somebody you know. I really didn't. Just even the fact that you are introduced to the female protagonist while she is having sex for no reason other than to kind of clue you, the reader, in. It's like, okay, she's no nonsense and she's really serious, but she's also nasty. And why would you need to know that about her? You don't. It doesn't make any difference. So it's such an offensive book. I didn't like it. If you want more, check out my full review on it. I drop it on the floor when I'm done talking about it. I believe that's the review where I do that. The next one is another thing I have a full review of. It is If You Want to Make God Laugh by Bianca Marais. This was a book that, again, really wanted to make you cry, like desperately. And it was interesting because I tweeted that I was reading a book that was determined to make me cry and mentioned the name of it. Well, Bianca Marais must have searched her name on Twitter because she commented and said, "That is such an honor, thank you." And what's interesting about that is that I didn't actually mean it as a compliment. So that's just kind of funny. And the book is really emotionally manipulative. The writing's not great. The plotting's not great. What really made me angry about it, though, was that it's about a woman who takes on a sort of adopted son and wants to care for him. And the book is repeatedly implying that he should not be raised by her. There's this mythical connection between the mother, the birth mother, and her son, and the other woman is getting in the way of that. And there is a plot line where the birth mother didn't actually want to give up her son. So it's fraught from that perspective. But to me, especially as a foster father, it seems so irresponsible to make that argument. And the book does it to the point where this baby who never met his mother, he was taken away the second he was born, somehow recognizes his mother when he's only a year old. And not only does he recognize his mother and accept her attempts to take care of him, he rejects the attempts of his adopted mother to be his mother, to be maternal, to take care of him. It made me mad. It made me really mad. So if you want more, check out the full review of that one as well. And I think I'll leave it at that. I think those are the books, at least that I had tagged as hated it on my reading apps. So I think they're pretty comprehensive. I can't think there of any others that I would have hate read, at least not in recent years. But I would love to hear what you have hate read if you hate read. So if you have a channel, feel free. This isn't a tag video, but if you would like to do it, feel free to do what I did and pick up on Middle of the Book March's conversation and have at it. If you don't have a channel, I would love to hear anything you've hate read in the comment section down below. Or if you have a channel and just don't want to do the video on your own, let me know what you have hate read in the past. Or if you want to fight me about any of these books that I hate read, feel free to do so in the comment section down below. Just keep it civil. That's my only guideline. So let me know what you think. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.